So I want to shoot my 6 Creed, but we're running a little low on ammo for that, believe it or not. So I thought this would be a great time to do some load development for that 6 Creedmoor and get more practice myself at the same time. What we're going to do is check out this Frankford Arsenal Essentials Reloading Kit, and we'll get it out of the box and show you what it's all about. Hey there, Kyle Shields from UltimateReloader.com. So on the channel, we have used a lot of Frankford Arsenal gear. We've covered the F1 press, we've covered the hand priming tool, and we've covered the funnel kit. And we like each of those pieces of gear, but what's cool about this is it includes almost everything you need, and it's perfect for someone who is a seasoned reloader or a brand new reloader, or maybe you want to get it as a gift for someone. So anyway, let's just go ahead and get it out of the box and see what we've got. Okay, so first I had to stop before I completely tore all this down because I was quite impressed by the packaging. They did a really cool job with all this, and the branding looks nice. So I just kind of wanted to go over what we have in the kit all laid out here. So obviously we got the press, we got a reloading tray, which helps a lot during your process, the scale, the powder trickler, the hand priming tool, calipers in this little container, we got the funnel kit, and then we've got the benchtop powder measure. So that's all there is to it. And what I'm going to do next is get all this set up. I can't wait to use it and do some load development with this. All right, so I have everything out of the box and mounted to the bench. So not only do I want to go over the Frankford Arsenal gear, but I also want to cover some of the other essentials that you'll need. In my case, I'm loading for 6 Creedmoor, so I needed to find the items I need for that. And what does that include? That includes dies and a shell holder. Then you'll need your load components as well. So brass, you'll need your powder, you'll need the right size primers. In my case, that is small rifle primers. And you'll also need to pick up some case lube. Some kits include case lube, some do not. Either way, I do prefer to use this Imperial sizing wax, as I think it's my favorite to use because it goes such a long way and it works really, really well. It's very consistent. The other thing you want to consider is case cleaning and prep tools. So that includes a tumbler, whether it's a wet or dry tumbler, as well as a chamfer deburr tool and a trimming tool of some sort. So what did I do to get all this mounted? It's pretty straightforward. To get the press mounted, I use an inline fabrication bench mount. I really do like these things. They have all sorts of different sizes. This is the low rise. I have the flush mounted one at home. It works really, really well. Keeps more space on your bench for later if you like. So got the press mounted, pretty easy. It's pretty solid, as you can see. But if you don't want to use an inline fab mount, you can also use their little template that they include here, which is the mounting holes for the press, which is really nice because I've definitely messed around trying to get the scaling right on printout templates, if you can even find them. So it's cool that they include that, but definitely do yourself a favor and pick one of these up. So I got all my cases cleaned, got them dropped into this case tray here. The next thing I did was get the Perfect Seat hand priming tool set up. So I dropped in the small rifle primers that I had found, got all the anvils up by shaking the little tray here. And then I installed the appropriate shell holder by finding it on the chart that they include. And they include all sorts of different calibers. So I just found the one that I needed, which was 6 Creedmoor. So found out that was shell holder number 2. I got that snapped in and then put in a case and seated a primer and checked it. And right from the box, it was good to go. I didn't have to make any adjustments or anything like that, as I was pretty happy with how that looked. And that's the one I ended up with. And as you can see, it sits on there really flush, and the primer sits just underneath the bottom of the case, which is what you want. So I was happy with that and was good to go there. So then I moved on to the benchtop powder measure. I got the stand mounted onto the Ultimate Reloader bench system here. They do also include a template for that if you want to use that as well and mount it directly to your bench. Once I got the stand on there, I got the powder measure all cleaned with acetone, made sure it was completely free of debris and any type of oil that comes from the factory. It is recommended that you do that so you get nice uniform flow and everything's working perfectly. Then I got a charge roughly dialed in and used the micrometer to get close to where I want to be, which in my case, that is in the end going to be 43 grains, but I dialed it for 42.7, 42.5, somewhere around there, just a few grains under or so I can bring it over and trickle it up. Since we are loading precision ammo, we do want to manually trickle it up to where we want to be, again, in this case, 43 grains. The last thing I did was get the funnel assembled, which is really straightforward. It's just a insert with a O-ring, and you find the appropriate size collet, in my case 243, just snap it in, and it's good to go. And setting up the scale was really easy since it's self-calibrating. The only thing I did was check it with the included check weight. So what you'll want to do is switch the scale to the proper unit. In this case, it's grams for the check weight. I dropped the check weight on there, everything checked out, and I was good to go. Okay, so that's all the setup that I'll need to load 6 Creedmoor. Next, what we'll do is cover the reloading process in a little bit more detail. All right, so I'm set up to load 6 Creedmoor. The first thing we're going to want to do is clean the cases. Now, why would you want to clean the cases? Because even though these are already cleaned, what will happen is if this is range pickup brass, or you fired this multiple times, or it got really gritty or dirty, anything like that, it can actually have the potential of scratching your die, which you don't want to do. And another thing is a lot of people tend to like pretty looking brass, and it does look pretty nice when you get them all cleaned up. So then you'll move on to sizing and depriming. So that's usually in one step. Some people break that up into 2 steps, but to keep it easy, we're doing this in one step with a full sizing die. So you'll size and deprime, and sometimes after that, I would even clean again to get all the case lube off. But if you're just doing small batches, like with this Imperial Wax, you can wipe it off with a shop towel or something like that. It's totally up to you how far you want to go, how clean you want your brass. Again, it's up to you, but you can simply wipe off the cases after that, and you're good to move on. So if your brass needs trimmed, that's what you'll do next. And you can do that with any of the trimming tools. We won't be covering that here, but you'll want to pick up some sort of case trimming tool, and you'll want to trim your brass to maybe min SAMI spec. Look at one of the charts and figure out where you want to be. Sometimes in the middle of the trim spec is a good place to aim as well. Just make sure that it's going to fit in your chamber properly. Then we'll move on to priming. And some presses have on-press priming. A lot of people prefer these hand priming tools. However you want to do it, that's the next step in the process. Then you'll move on to powder charging. And you can use something like one of these powder measures here, or an electronic measure, or even manually scoop them in and trickle them up. However you want to do it. And last, everyone's favorite part, bullet seating. So you'll take one of your bullet seating dies, you'll have that set up and dialed in, and you'll start seating all your bullets one by one, and meanwhile checking to make sure each of them have powder, to make sure you didn't skimp on one of the cases. You definitely don't want to squib load. So that is an overview of the process. Next, we're actually going to do some reloading. Okay, so for cases, we have Federal small rifle primer, once fired brass here. Then we have Federal small rifle primers. For our powder, we have Winchester Stayball 6.5. And for bullets, we have Berger 105 grain hybrid target. All right, now we're on to sizing our cases. But before you do that, as mentioned briefly before, you want to make sure that your cases are cleaned. Now, I used a dry tumbler for these, and I tumbled them for about an hour. And you can tumble in the dry tumbler for about an hour, 3 hours, give or take, maybe 30 minutes at minimum if you just want to get the dirt and grime off of that. But there are a few other methods you can use to get your cases clean. You can also wet tumble, which I also have done. It's a little bit more involved. Your cases get wet, so you need to make sure that they're fully dry before you start reloading. You don't want to load wet cases. And you can also use an ultrasonic cleaner. And ultrasonic cleaner I haven't really used for cleaning cases. The one I have, and probably that most people have, are pretty small, so they're really only good for small batches of like 20 to 50 pieces of brass. It's a good method if that's all you have and you want to repurpose your ultrasonic cleaner to also clean your cases. But generally speaking, I'd recommend that you use a dry tumbler. They're the most affordable, the easiest, and they get your cases clean enough. Maybe not quite as shiny as a wet tumbler, but definitely clean enough. So what we do now is move on to our die setup. So I got this die set up. I installed the shell holder. You want to make sure you have the appropriate shell holder. I turned the die down, raised the ram, so I turned the die down until it touched the shell holder and gave it a little bit of cam over. and I ran a lubed case through with the sizing wax, and just checked my shoulder bump. So I took the Hornady headspace comparator here, and I zeroed it onto a case, which I can show you about what that looks like. So you just bring it in, we're getting a measurement, and just hit 0. So that is probably the easiest way. So when you're adjusting your die for rifle, you generally want it from 1/1000 to -0.002 or so. So you want to keep adjusting your die until you get to that number consistently. And once you do, you can tighten your lock ring, tighten your grub screw, and your setting is good to go for your sizing die on your press. So that will make sure that your shoulder bump is set appropriately. The other thing you can do is use a case gauge to check to make sure that it is going to go into your chamber. So got one here, just run your finger along, make sure it sits flush. This one does. And let's just, for demonstration, take an unsized case, something that you've picked up and cleaned already. As you can tell, that does not fit in the chamber. So it should be pretty obvious that this is unsized since it has a primer still in it. But that gets you an idea of kind of what we're doing. And what happens is the body is squeezed down, the shoulder is bumped, and the neck is squeezed back down to basically accept our bullet. So what I'm going to do now is just load a few cases to show you what this is like. So we have our clean cases, again with the primer in there. Just take very, very little bit if you're using imperial sizing wax, and it helps to have a towel handy or something to wipe your fingers off. You just want to wipe the body of the case. Don't get the shoulder area. You don't want to get any type of denting from hydraulics because liquids don't compress all that well. So if you see dents, just use a little bit less case lube. This case lube I found is hard to really mess up, but it is possible. Don't go crazy. Also, run maybe a few cases through, get your die lubed up if it's cleaned or brand new. Also make sure your die is cleaned over the manufacturing oils. And then we're just going to run our cases through, making sure we're using a consistent amount of pressure, about like so. So this is where we can clean the cases again if you like, so you can toss them in an acro bin or something, or just right into your tumbler. But you can move on and check to see if it's going to fit in your chamber. So that's all there really is to it. You just keep doing this over and over and over again until you have all the sized cases that you want. And sometimes, keep in mind too, if you're new, it might be easier to go with the process. So you're sizing, wiping down, setting it down. I find like more of a assembly line approach with it works really well. So maybe get all your cases lubed up and sized, and then set them in the tray and wipe them up later. You can also just get them all lubed at once. That might be a little bit more of a streamlined process. In the end of the day, you'll find what works for you. But if you're new to this, take your time. Even if you're experienced, take your time. It never hurts to slow down. Take a breather. Make sure you're doing everything right. Double check your numbers. And if you like, you can check your shoulder bump once again, and even take a random case. If it still has lube on it, wipe it off and drop it in your min chamber just to be sure that it is definitely still good to go. So the end result is that it will chamber in your rifle after fully sized. So next we'll move on to trimming. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is check our case length after full length sizing. So what we'll want to do is take off this Hornady headspace comparator tool and get our calipers zeroed. So looks like they're already zeroed in. Just make sure. Okay, cool. And what we want to look for is to make sure that the case length is no longer than 1.920, which would mean that we need to trim. Right now we're about 1.917. Helps to give these a little bit of a spin to make sure they're fully settled. 1.917, 1.916. So the max case length for 6 Creed is 1.920. You can go down to 1.900, or you can strike it in the middle with 1.910, which is typically about where I would trim. I like splitting in the middle. So for these, I'm not going to trim to save a step in the process here, but just keep in mind if your cases are longer than that case length, that max case length, you will want to trim to make sure you're within spec. There are many different ways to trim, both on and off press, but if you want to know how to achieve the perfect trim, definitely take a look at the video Gavin did on that. So another process you might need to do is swage your primer pockets. So some brass is military crimped, and there's multiple styles of crimp. Some of them are hard to see. You'll want to run it through a swaging die or a reaming tool. So we're not going to cover that on here either, but that is something you want to keep in mind. You might, if you don't know what it looks like or you didn't keep an eye out for it, and when you go to prime, if priming is very difficult, your primers are getting scraped or not seating or getting crushed, that might be an indicator that you need to do a swaging process. So anyway, that's all there is to that. Next, let's go on to priming. All right, so there are multiple ways that you can prime your cases. You can either use the on-press priming, which this one does not because they include the Perfect Seat hand primer, which is a really awesome tool. You can use an on-bench priming system, or you can use a hand primer like this one. The advantages to a hand primer versus on-press priming is you can't necessarily take your press anywhere, like say your couch or something, and kind of nail out a bunch of cases at once. So the cool thing about these priming systems is they're very accurate and they're also very portable. So one thing you want to look for is that you're fully seating the primer like I have here. So in preparation for all my setup. So you want to make sure it's right below flush and not sitting proud. So when you set it on a table, you want to make sure that it's seating flat. And you can load these primers 100 at a time. Of course, you could always do a little bit less. But the neat thing about this tool is not only is it accurate, but it has this little gate that you can open or close. So if you're done with priming or want to remove this and take it off and put something else on there, you can, or empty your primers. So what we'll do is first, me being me, almost forgot, nerd up because why not? Don't blow your eyeballs out. So you want to make sure that you are keeping everything safe, and if one of these goes off, it is pretty volatile. We've definitely shown that on the channel before. It's quite more than you might expect. So we do have a deprimed case. This is a good time to check that your Fulling sizer die or decapping process has fully knocked out these primers. So you just want to make sure that you are seeing a primer that has fallen through into the little opening there. And make sure that you have the appropriate shell holder for the caliber that you're loading. Just give it a little bit of a squeeze, and then there you go. So that one is seated. And it is simple as this over and over again. So if your primers aren't fully seated and they are a little low or too high, you can use this adjustment wheel to move it up or down in 1,000th increments. So it's a pretty accurate tool. And why you definitely want to wear something like readers or something is because you almost have to, at least I naturally want to look over into the priming tool, and if this went off, that would not be fun. Make sure that you're able to see where the primer is going to go, but definitely point it away or look away when you're priming. That way, in case it does go off, you're not going to be injuring yourself there. Cool. So that is all of our cases primed. So guys covered this priming tool on the channel before. If you want more of an in-depth look at that, definitely go take a look at that video. One thing that I like about this priming tool is that it has a positive stop, so it really reduces the chance of crushing your primers. Next, let's move on to powder charging. All right, so for powder, you want to make sure that you first look up the load data for the caliber that you're loading for. So of course, 6mm for me. And what I did is went on the website for Hodgdon and looked up Stay Ball 6.5, and I found that you can throw a charge anywhere from 40.2 to 43.7. Now I don't want to go quite to the max charge of 43.7. I'm going to go a little bit underneath that and go to 43. So I've been letting the scale warm up here a little bit. It just auto turned itself off. There's a couple ways that you can throw your charges. The first method is just throw right from the powder charger itself, and that's more of a low precision style where maybe you're loading for an AR, maybe it's just plinking ammo, something like that, and you just want to get through throwing your powder quicker. The other method is using this powder trickler, which is included with the kit as we covered. And what you'll do is throw your charge a little under. So I'll go ahead and do that. Actually I'll grab this. So you can use the pan, or you could, if you're throwing directly, you can use the case. But we'll just throw our charge here. And you want to make sure you use a consistent motion. It's very similar to what you do for the press. So as you see here, we're at 42.7/42.6, give or take. We're just going to slowly turn the trickler until we get up to 43. And this, especially for ball powder, can flow pretty quickly, so you don't want to go too quick, otherwise you might throw an overcharge. Right about there. Let it settle a bit. 43, 43.1 is close enough for me. So what we'll do is take our funnel and drop it into one of our cases here. And charge the powder. And we'll move on to the next. So yeah, calibrating the scale is really easy. It's auto-calibrating, and what I like to do before I even turn it on is just set the pan on there, and it will auto-tare your zero, which is really convenient. So, pretty cool. There we go, 43. All right, so set this down, get this out of the way so you can get a better view there. Move this. Definitely keep mindful too, if you're setting your funnel around, just double check that you're not doing a double charge. It would be pretty obvious, but because it would overflow, but it's something you can definitely do by accident if you're not careful, and you just want to dump it back into the hopper there. So this is probably one of the parts where, definitely one of the parts where you want to keep a watchful eye of what you're doing. Don't get distracted. Make sure that you're not throwing too much powder for what you want, especially as you get close to that max charge. There we go. So one thing I'm definitely looking forward to is doing some more load development. Like I said, this is just a starting ground near max charge for the 6 Creed, but I definitely want to start messing with my charge weights, my bullet seating depth, that sort of stuff, to really dial in a good, precise load for this rifle that Gavin gave me. So I'm pretty excited to pretty much hone in my skills. I don't have a whole lot of trigger time compared to Gavin or Guy, and I'm still learning a whole lot. So I can't wait to continue going up the mountain and doing a lot more shooting, especially as the weather gets nicer here. So with this, it's pretty much just rinse, repeat. As you can see, I don't have many cases here, but if you were doing this 50 times, it's kind of therapeutic, really. At least I think. Again, definitely pay attention though. Don't let yourself get distracted. It's totally okay to walk away, do this another time if you're just getting a little bored of throwing your powder weights, but it is very, very important. That over. So, the next thing that we'll be doing is seating our bullets. All right, so the last step is bullet seating, and what I've got here is the Berger 105 grain hybrid target bullets, and these have been used in Gavin's previous load for matches, which is what I'm going to be referencing here. I also got the die roughly set up, and what I'll do is just get a basic measurement to go off of and then fine tune it from there. One thing you might want to consider is the cartridge overall length. Now, you may or may not care if you can feed these through a magazine. So if you seat past SAMI spec, it is possible that you might have to single round feed your ammo, which may or may not be important to you. In this case, these are right under the cartridge overall length, so they should feed just fine. So what I'll do first is show you roughly where our measurement is landing at. The max cartridge overall length for 6 Creedmoor is 2.800. And it looks like he's got these right under that at 2.790, which I'm totally fine with that. So what we'll do is first back off our seating die way off, like further than we need, because we don't want to push our reference cartridge in here. You could also use a dummy round too, and it's one thing Gavin likes to do is make a dummy round first. Another thing to mention is that I got the appropriate collet in here. Now this is the Frankford Arsenal Universal Seating die, so it can work with a wide range of calibers, which is pretty cool. So one die to cover most of them. All right, so we'll insert our fully loaded round here. And what we want to do is lower this until we feel a slight bit of resistance. About right in there, so maybe back off just a touch. That feels pretty good. So we'll set that one aside, and we'll take one of our ready to go prepped and charged brass. Now the cool thing is we can just drop the bullet right from the top, which I really like that feature. Makes it a lot quicker than fumbling around near the press. So raise the ram, and now we've got a seated bullet. So what we want to check is to make sure our overall length is close. So 2.7, so 2.76, that means I need to come up quite a good deal. So probably about 20 thousandths. That was 5, 10, 15, 20 or so. Let's try that. .797. That's pretty darn close. So I definitely like the micrometer feature on there because you can quickly see where you're at, dial things in, and quickly get right to the number you want to be in. Actually, let's fully seat it in. Another thing you can check is concentricity, if that is of interest to you. The run out from this setup has been really good, especially from the F1 that we previously have tested. The other thing that I haven't had experience with is neck tension. I have never actually really messed with my neck tension. I never personally bought a bushing type die, and that's not because I'm opposed to it. It's just I always covered my bases with my full length sizing dies first. So that's something I definitely want to look into as I further do some load development and further improve my shooting skills, really. And as you can see here, you could fly through these pretty quick with this whole drop-in setup. It's really awesome. There we are. So we've loaded our 6 Creed ammo. When Gavin gave me the 6 Creedmoor, I was definitely looking forward to having something that would help hone in my skills as a shooter and even as a reloader. So I've been looking forward to finally getting some shooting time and loading time with that rifle. Using this kit has been pretty awesome so far. As we've seen, it can produce some pretty accurate ammo, and you can always check out our other videos that go along with each piece of gear that we've covered here on the channel. We really like our 6s on this channel, ranging from the 6 Creedmoor that I have, the 6 GT, the 6 ARC, the 6 Dasher, and even the Creedmoors, like the 6.5 Creedmoor, which I also have. I actually started reloading precision ammo with the 6.5 Creedmoor. That's kind of what started my journey from just loading some basic plinking ammo to learning the skills of loading for my 6.5 Creedmoor. So what's next? Well, that will be getting some groups on paper and seeing how well I and the ammo actually performs. So what did you guys think of this Frankford Arsenal Essentials reloading kit? I think it's pretty cool. What are you loading for? Do you load 6 Creed? Do you load any of the other 6s? Let me know. So that will be all for this one. I'm looking forward to doing some more videos with you guys, and I'll see you later.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. If you want to learn lucrative gunsmithing like what I show here on the channel, including building custom rifles and Cerakote plus a whole bunch more, you're going to want to check out the Colorado School of Trades, schooloftrades.edu. Thanks again for watching.